On today's show, founder of the London Dance Festival, Bizz Varty, and Cree Anishinaabe artist and writer, Jenna Rose Sands. Join me as we learn more about these hidden gems of London. Welcome to London's Hidden Talent. I'm your host, Jennifer Martino. In London, Ontario, our art and culture scene is thriving thanks to the creative talents of lifelong Londoners and people from around the world who have made this community their home. Together, we will get to know the people who are bringing our stages, galleries, and streets to life. First up, we have the founder of the London Dance Festival, Bizz Varty. Bizz is a versatile dance educator and choreographer who earned her specialized honors Bachelor of Fine Arts in Dance from York University. She has facilitated dance programs through the London Art Council and has choreographed and performed across Ontario. Bizz, thank you for joining us on London's Hidden Talent today. Really excited to have you here as somebody who is a choreographer and who puts on an amazing annual festival, but also just a great community builder, a teacher, someone who's inspiring all people who want to be a part of our local dance community. So thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Most people probably know your work, I guess, through the London Dance Festival, a beautiful celebration that we see every year. Tell us a little bit about the festival and how you ended up landing on that format of self-expression and community building.
Yeah, well, I had lived in Toronto for a while and I wasn't getting anywhere with what I wanted to do in the arts. Everything was already happening in Toronto, and I was brought back to London for family and other reasons, and there just wasn't anything going on here. There weren't any big dance shows. There were lots of studios. There's tons of education in dance here in London, but there wasn't a festival, and the Guelph Dance Festival was having great success, and a couple other smaller community-focused kind of outdoorsy dance festivals were really thriving in other cities. And so I thought I'd give it a try. And that was 11 years ago.
Yeah, and how did you find that Londoners responded? Everything needs time to grow, but were you finding right from the beginning that there was an appetite to see more dance in our community, or is that something that you really had to work on building?
Yes and no. There was an appetite because of all of the dance education going on, but for those bigger national names in dance, there wasn't as much recognition. So we spend a lot of years building that recognition so that when we do invite outside artists in, they get the audience that they deserve. But there's a great amount of support for Londoners within London. And I've seen the amount of dance groups, dance companies that are putting on their own performances around the year. It's grown exponentially since the festival started. So I think that's a good sign.
It is a good sign, and I think we're finding that with all kinds of community celebrations of different mediums, and including ones where you've got art and music and dance together, that London is really alive with ways that you can get out in our community and connect with local artists. And one of the ways you can do that is through Doors Open. Yeah. You're working on a really big project right now that sounds pretty exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It's grown out of my connection to the community through the festival. I'm creating a dance inspired by my grandmother's memoirs. She grew up on Quebec Street and got her first library card literally 100 years ago. Wow. At Carson Library. And so we're going to do a walking tour with pop-up dance performances at different locations in Old East Village. And it'll have professional dancers, some guest performers with different styles of dance, and then community youth and a group of volunteers, kind of flash mob style, rounding out the cast. So it's going to be everybody in. There's a little something for everyone there. And it's been really nice to connect with all those different layers of the dance community.
And that's such a unique way of experiencing dance, because so often think of dance as something that happens in one particular location, whether you're going to dance and you're at a club, yep, or even maybe you're at on Dundas Place. We've got the Latin Passion Dance Academy that does dance every Friday, yep, for example. But to actually travel around and use that as a way to get to know a neighborhood is so interesting. How did you land on that format?
It was a bit of a collaboration. I had been thinking about doing something with Carson Library, but then I spoke to Dira at the Heritage Council, and she said, oh, make it into a tour. And so it has expanded from there.
Wow. Yeah. So neat.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to dance as your preferred form of expression?
Well, my father's a musician, and there was always a lot of music playing in my house, and it made me want to dance. And apparently, around the age of 5 or 6, I told my mom I wanted to be a ballerina. And the rest is history. I started out at Lorian School of Dance, which is a local school that's not really around anymore. But from there, I went to York, and then I hung out in the Toronto dance scene for a while, and then I tried to bring the best of that scene back here.
Well, and that's a big part of what this show is all about, that there are people who are from London, that were born here and have gone to other places and have brought back what they've seen from other communities. And then also people who grew up in other countries and are able to bring their unique perspective, both to appreciating what we have here currently, but also what London could be. When you think about how you would like to see the cultural community locally evolve, especially when it comes to dance going forward, do you have any thoughts about that and any visions or projects that you would like to get going in our community?
The cultural dance scene in London is incredible. There are so many different forms, and every year at the festival we try to get one more that we haven't seen before. I think that the cultural dances are a really great way for people to start dancing. It's that it pulls them in. What I would like to see is the elevation of some of those forms. Lots of traditional cultural dances are often performed, but sometimes an artist can take that, add some contemporary moves, and spin it into something even more resonant for the audience. And I love when I see that they can bring a traditional style in a more contemporary way.
I'm really interested in Latin dance and Latin music, and something that I find fascinating about the way that we see dance from an Anglo-Saxon perspective is it's something that you so often think you need to be trained in, or it's something that some people do, but a lot of people feel like I can't possibly do that. And I think it's so interesting when you mention how people get into dance because they have that cultural connection often, but you can build from that. So what do you say to people who tell you, I love dance, I love watching other people do it, but I'm not sure that I could possibly get into that myself?
I would say there's no wrong way to do it. I mean, if you went to a training facility, they might tell you there's a right way to do it, but all of the benefits of dance are available to anyone who's willing to let go a little bit and move with the music. I recently read a book about the psychology of dance, and just moving your body with a beat does these amazing, amazing things in our brain that really make us feel good and connected to other people. And so I don't think there should be a barrier, but there's always that, as you said, the Anglo-Saxon view of, oh, but people are going to see me. And there's that expression, dance like nobody's watching. But that's not really the point. Dance because it feels good. Dance to celebrate. That's what I think.
Yeah, because dancing isn't about looking good. Dancing is actually about feeling good.
Yeah.
And what are some of the benefits that you found in your own personal life from having dance as part of your everyday life?
Oh, it's my entire life in many ways, and so it's kind of hard to separate it out. But dance is, it's good exercise, it's good for my mental health, it's a great way to connect with other family members, to meet friends. There are so many ways you can use dance. In teaching, even when I'm not teaching a dance class, I usually sneak in some dance moves because physical activity, especially the kind that connects with music and that kind of just gets you that good groovy feeling, is good for everybody.
Yeah, it's so important that we keep ourselves moving, and that's something that we forget.
Yeah,
even sitting here right now.
I know. Well, you'll notice I don't really sit still.
Perhaps if we sit. Yeah. I was also wondering about some of the other ways that you think that we could use dance to build community. And, finding now that there are so many projects happening in the city, but they're by kind of individual groups and they're doing their own thing. And that's really special and it's really important. Have you had any success with collaborations and trying to connect people to maybe build a bigger, more cohesive scene in our community?
Mm-hmm. you're right. The London dance scene and many other art scenes can be kind of siloed, like people are busy doing their thing. And I have found that's both better and worse since the pandemic because people were more isolated, but they're more connected digitally. Oh boy, lost the question there.
No, but about how we could bring people together and kind of make those connections rather than having just the more individualized, separate communities.
Yeah, that's something we really strive to do at the festival, is to bring all those different parts of the dance ecosystem together and have them dance side by side. We put professionals next to youth, and we put cultural dance groups that maybe aren't doing contemporary work next to something really contemporary, and try to mix it up and then get everyone involved dancing together. We do this annual dance mob where we have a local person create a dance that's pretty simple to learn to an upbeat song, and then we spend a while teaching as many people as possible, and then literally anyone can join us on stage or on the grass area that we call the stage at the festival and be a part of it. And we've had people join who don't know the moves at all. We said, come on and join us, and folks jump up from the audience and just follow along, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, I think dance is something that we can all relate to. It's got to be a part of our lives at some point growing up, one of our most joyous moments. If you think about weddings, right? Or you think about any great party, you've got people moving. So I'm not surprised that people are jumping up and joining in. And we actually do have some footage of a dance mob that you put together. Yeah. Excited for people to see that. If they would like to connect with you, to learn more about you, to maybe be a part of the festival or other projects that you have going on, how could they find you?
They can find us online. The londondancefestival.ca is an event put on by my nonprofit, which is called the Center of Movement Arts, but the website is centerofmovement.ca, and we're also on Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you for everything that you're doing to make dance more prevalent in our community. As I said, we all need to learn to move more, and I have so much fun when I'm dancing, and I know that that's something that's available to every single Londoner. They just have to go for it, and as you said, stop worrying about what people think, stop worrying about who's watching, and just worry about how you feel, and dance feels great. So thank you for everything you're doing to remind people of that in our community. And I'm looking forward to coming out and seeing what you do next.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have Jenna Rose Sands. Jenna Rose is a Cree Anishinaabe artist and writer based in London, Ontario. Jenna's work pairs dynamic mixed media with powerful storytelling to change perceptions and foster understanding about Indigenous issues. Jenna's zine series, Atrocities Against Indigenous Canadians for Dummies, aims to educate and challenge widespread prejudice against Indigenous people by focusing on their experiences and the numerous atrocities they have faced, including topics like residential schools and cultural appropriation. Jenna Rose, thank you for being on London's Hidden Talent.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that you took the time for this. I actually didn't realize that you were a visual artist until I ran into you at Tap Center for Creativity, and I saw your art on the wall with your name beside it, and I thought there can't be that many Jenna Rose Sands out there. And then there you were. And I think people in our community know you for all kinds of other reasons, because you're an amazing community builder, you're an activist, you are very passionate about our community taking care of all Londoners, which is something that is really important to me as well. But today I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about your artistic side, both your visual art, but also the really amazing zine project that you have. So could you tell us maybe first a little bit about that zine? Because that's such a big piece of work that you did there, and it's so interesting.
Yeah, the zine project came out of a bit of a fever dream. I remember having the flu, and I woke up one day because I had read some pretty troubling headlines about Tina Fontaine and Colton Boushie, and I was really distraught that we were still in a state where I was reading, harmful comments and misconceptions about Indigenous folks and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And I had this dream, and I woke up being like, I need to do something about it. And when I'm frustrated or upset, I really look to turn that into action. And I grew up, you know, in the music scene, buying zines, collecting zines. So it felt like a really natural project to get out my frustrations about stigmas and prejudice and racism regarding Indigenous community members and through zines. So I started picking for each zine, it would be a topic, just sort of educate on the history of that, perspectives that were out there, questions. So the first one was about residential schools, and the second one was missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The third was 60 Scoop, and the fourth was cultural appropriation. And then there's been a few other ones. It's ongoing as I find the time, which I don't frequently have lately, but yeah.
It's a really interesting and different way for people to explore those issues. I mean, those are the four big topics that every Canadian needs to understand, and so many people don't. These are topics that people are very uncomfortable with. Also, they tend to be topics where either they might err on the side of being too confident with their question asking, or they could not know what to ask and therefore ask nothing. So when I was looking at the style and the format of your zines, your writing is powerful and you share a very clear message. There's also humor in there in the way that you write, and I wonder, like, is that something that was intentional, or is that just because that's what comes from you naturally?
I think it's a little bit of both. You know, my mother used to say that our communities are hilarious because we have to be. Like, the alternative is crying and not thriving. So having sort of a wicked and dark sense of humor is a pretty common trait, I think, of Indigenous communities. Also, the information that's in these zines are not things that aren't already out there, but I recognize that, you know, in our, you know, media culture now, it's scroll through, it's easy to click a like and be like, I support it, without actually reading it. So I wanted to pair it with something visually dynamic. I wanted it to be, you know, a physical copy of something that you can easily ignore, or just be like, I'm going to put it in my save folder of tabs I want to read later. And I wanted to, like, the information is really jarring and it can be really emotionally difficult, but I think pairing it with the imagery and stuff. So, you know, this lighthearted kid imagery that I find from old books, kids' craft books, and it's like from the 50s and 60s, things to do on a rainy day. Pretend you're an Indian. It's like that used to be an acceptable thing to some folks. So it was intentional. But I think that's just also how I exist in the world. Yeah.
And it can help people if they're not uncomfortable to laugh. And the bottom line is, if something reaches you in a place of humor, then you need to explore that and you need to go with it. One particular thing that stands out to me when I was reading about the project is when you talked about how we refer to powwows and all of the ways that you wouldn't want to do that, for example, for your wine club.
Yeah, that's a common thing. And I've experienced that even within my own professional life, where people are like, come on down to the boardroom, we're going to have a powwow. And I'm like, that's not cool. Did you know that was illegal up until like recent? And people are like, oh, it's no big deal. And it's like, well, it's not a big deal to you, but you know, language is powerful and it is a big deal to other folks. And, you know, explaining the reasons why, you know, if you're saying no to something, then I find giving a why to that no is really helpful. But, you know, if something's uncomfortable, I'm pretty big on leaning into it. You know, change is only going to come from feeling uncomfortable. So.
Yeah. And there's a lot of resistance to that discomfort. And people can even get very angry about it. When you talked about cultural appropriation, something that became very clear to me after I had my daughter, and her father's from Saugeen First Nation, and I started to look at my friends and their Halloween costumes of their kids, and I started going into places like the Halloween store and seeing, like, not being able to believe that you would consider an Indigenous woman to be a costume. And I started sharing that every year at Halloween and found that a lot of people in my circles who I consider very close really resisted that notion, and to even feel like they could think about why that would be harmful. And so you do talk about costumes specifically, both referring to regalia as a costume, but also going into a store and buying something that is made out of plastic. Like, I can't even really understand how we're still doing that. But maybe, like, how have you found any effective ways to have these conversations, and especially if someone's really pushing back and feeling like you're asking something unreasonable of them when you're asking them to consider looking at this in a different way?
I think that's the focus of the zine projects too, is that having to explain over and over and over and over again all of these things, where I can just be like, and here you go. I don't actually have to extend my capacity and labor to teach someone. Like, everyone is walking around with phones in their pockets. It's easy to understand how not to do some of these things. But to be like, and here you go. Whether folks choose to make choices to better themselves, that's their agency in that, but I don't have to engage in the labor of teaching them. I also don't have to engage in hanging out with them. So, I mean, to be able to say, here you go, I feel you need to learn some stuff. If they choose to read it and learn and question and go on that journey, that's great. But I also have the choice to be like, wow, this isn't a cool interaction. I'm not going to do it. So, yeah, I mean, people can make choices to be harmful, but people can also make choices to say no and not be around. But yeah.
Yeah, and it was interesting what you were saying about there are so many resources online. You can send someone a bunch of articles, whether or not, like you said, they just save it for later, whether or not they ever read it. I think actually having something physical that you can give a person is very powerful. We don't tend to discard things like that as readily, and we're also able to go back to them, and they're an ongoing reminder of, I meant to look more into this, and I have this way of doing it that's really interesting too. There's nothing dry about your work.
Yeah, and I mean, it also, there's like so many reports and this and that, and it can be really draining to read through that. The language as well, that learning, that breaking down of stigma and prejudice and everything shouldn't be done with just 25-cent words. It should be accessible to understand. And also, it just looks cooler. Like you're like,
art.
Ooh, what is that? And I'm going to read it. And then, you're learning something. And it's quick. It's like you can read it in a lunch break, throw it in the lunchroom. There you go. People are reading it. I've created larger format ones. I've had some folks who are like, my grandma wants this and she wants to pass it around in her retirement home, and I'll do like a large print format and put them in, like a duotang sort of thing and send it off. The idea is literally to get information out there, and I think the imagery kind of brings folks in. But like I said, it's not information that's necessarily reinventing the wheel on these issues.
But you've done a lot of work to collect information and to process it and to put it out into the world in a really unique way. And one of those projects was to make a zine that's accessible to younger people. And I was reading about how you had the one about residential schools, and a lot of people are asking you, is it okay if I give this to my child? what was that process like of trying to take a topic that is about children and make it something for children, but also protecting them in some sense from identifying with what we have done to children as a society?
That one was really emotionally rough. I had to lean into my mom a lot. My mother was in Indian day schools where she grew up on Walpole Island. And, you know, my daughter at the time, she was about 6 or 7. And it was really hard to process and find the language of, I'm trying to explain to children what people have done to their age. And so I definitely had to have a lot of breaks of like, I just need to go call and cry to my mom, or how do I do this? It was a big struggle because you're trying to teach kids about what people who hold positions still now that they would seem as trustworthy would do to them. And especially if they're, you know, brown kids, you know, of any background. It's, well, this could have been your journey, and to try and explain that in a way was difficult. But I created it because I had so many people being like, "Can I give this to my kid?" And I was like, that one put adults in tears. I'm like, this may emotionally wreck a child, so just had to change it a bit. Yeah.
If somebody would like to find any of these resources, any of your zines, and you've covered topics that really every person in London, but also in Canada, needs to learn more about. You offer a totally different perspective and a way of processing that information. Artistically, visually, it's beautiful, really, really interesting work. And if anyone would like to get their hands on these artifacts, how can they do that?
Through my website and on social media, all the links are there. Yeah. So,
well, I need the whole set. Okay. So I hope you have some available.
I do.
We need them in our house. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and tell us about this really interesting and really unique project and form of artistic expression that most people likely didn't know that we have right here in London.
Thank you.